The Mare and the Blind Girl. Before we start, just a reminder, if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Now let's get to the video. The unexpected encounter. The dust clouds kicked up by Samuel Big Sam Morrison's horse settled slowly in the scorching Arizona heat as he approached the weathered homestead. At 6'8" and weighing near 300 pounds, Sam cut an imposing figure against the endless expanse of desert scrubland. His reputation as the giant rancher stretched across 3 territories, built on fair dealing and an iron will that had tamed both wild horses and wilder men. The letter in his vestapet had been brief. "Will care for your mare, payment as discussed. Jode Thompson." Sam had expected to find a grizzled old horseman, maybe a retired cavalry soldier looking to earn a few dollars. What he found instead made him pull his stallion to an abrupt halt. A young woman sat on the porch steps, her fingers moving delicately across what appeared to be a bridle, checking every stitch and buckle with practiced precision. Her auburn hair caught the late afternoon sun, and though her eyes gazed unseeing toward the horizon, there was something about her posture that spoke of quiet strength and determination. "You'd be J. Thompson, I reckon?" Sam's voice rumbled like distant thunder. The woman's head turned toward him, and a gentle smile crossed her features. "That would be me, Mr. Morrison. Though most folks call me Jenny." She stood gracefully, her hand trailing along the porch rail for guidance. "I've been expecting you and your mare." Sam dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the packer with a solid thud. Behind him, secured to a lead rope, stood Moonbeam, a magnificent silver-gray mare with spirit enough to match her beauty and stubbornness to rival a mule. 3 previous handlers had given up on her, claiming she was too wild, too unpredictable. "Miss Thompson," Sam began, his voice gentle now but still uncertain. "I appreciate your willingness to help, but I'm not sure you understand what you're taking on. This mare is frightened, angry, and has learned not to trust," Jenny interrupted, stepping down from the porch with surprising confidence. "I can hear it in her breathing, in the way she shifts her weight. She's been hurt, hasn't she?" Sam's weathered face creased into a frown. The girl was blind, yet she seemed to read Moonbeam better in 30 seconds than most folks could in 30 minutes. "She was mistreated before I bought her. Previous owner used a heavy hand and a heavier whip." Jenny nodded, moving slowly toward the mare. "Animals and people aren't so different, Mr. Morrison. We all carry our scars, seen and unseen." She extended her hand, palm up, letting Moonbeam catch her scent. "The question is whether we let those scars define us or teach us." Moonbeam snorted and danced sideways, but Jenny didn't flinch. Instead, she began to hum, a low, melodic tune that seemed to float on the desert air like a gentle breeze. The mare's ears pricked forward, and gradually her restless movement stilled. "I'll pay you $50 for a month's work," Sam said, though doubt still colored his voice. "But if you can't handle her, then you'll take her back, and I'll have learned something valuable," Jenny finished. "But Mr. Morrison, I think you might be surprised by what both Moonbeam and I are capable of." As if to punctuate her words, the mare took a tentative step forward, stretching her neck to sniff at Jenny's outstretched hand. For the first time in months, Moonbeam's eyes held curiosity instead of fear. Sam found himself nodding slowly. There was something about this young woman, a quiet confidence, that reminded him of the best horse trainers he'd known. "All right, Miss Jenny, 1 month, but I'll be checking in regular like." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Jenny replied, her smile widening as Moonbeam's soft muzzle finally touched her palm. "Welcome home, beautiful girl. We're going to be just fine." The first week proved more challenging than Jenny had let on. Moonbeam was indeed a magnificent creature, but her trauma ran deep. She would accept Jenny's touch one moment, then shy away violently the next, as if remembering some past cruel. Jenny bore several bruises from the mare's unpredictable movements, but she never raised her voice or showed frustration. "Easy, girl," Jenny murmured on the fourth morning, her hands moving slowly along Moonbeam's neck. "I know the world has been unkind to you, but not all hands bring pain." The mare stood in a small corral behind Jenny's modest cabin, her silver coat gleaming in the morning sun. Jenny had spent hours each day simply being present, talking softly, humming her melodies, and letting Moonbeam grow accustomed to her scent and voice. "You're talking to that horse like she's people," observed a gravelly voice from the fence. Jenny turned toward the sound, recognizing old Pete Hawkins, her nearest neighbor. Pete had been checking on her regularly since her father's death 2 years prior, though he'd never quite approved of a blind woman living alone on the frontier. "Maybe that's because she understands more than most people give her credit for," Jenny replied, continuing her gentle ministration. "Animals don't lie, Pete. They don't pretend to be something they're not." Pete spat into the dust. "That Morrison fellow's got more money than sense, leaving a valuable animal with—" He caught himself before finishing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air. "With a blind woman." Jenny's voice held no anger, only mild amusement. "You know, Pete, I may not be able to see Moonbeam's coat or the way she moves, but I can feel her heartbeat, hear every breath, sense every tension in her muscles. Sometimes not seeing can help you understand more clearly." As if to prove her point, Moonbeam lowered her head, allowing Jenny to scratch behind her ears, something she hadn't permitted since arriving. Pete watched in amazement as the notoriously difficult mare actually leaned into the touch. "Well, I'll be hornswoggled," Pete muttered. Over the following days, Jenny established a routine. Each morning, she would lead Moonbeam to the small pasture, spending time grooming her with brushes her father had left behind. She would talk constantly about the weather, about the birds she could hear singing, about her memories of growing up on the homestead. "My father used to say that horses are mirrors," Jenny told Moonbeam one afternoon, as she worked a particularly stubborn tangle from the mare's man. "They reflected back what we bring to them. If we bring fear, they become fearful. If we bring anger, they become defensive. But if we bring patience and understanding—" Moonbeam nickered softly, as if agreeing. Jenny had lost her sight to a fever when she was 12, but her father, a former cavalry officer, had refused to treat her as helpless. He'd taught her to navigate by sound and touch, to read the world through senses most people ignore. When he died, leaving her the small homestead, many expected her to sail and move to town. Instead, she'd stayed, determined to prove that blindness didn't mean helplessness. "You know what I think, Moonbeam," Jenny said, running her hands along the mare's flanks to check for any injuries or sensitive spots. "I think you and I understand each other because we both had to learn to see the world differently than most folks." The mare turned her head toward Jenny, her dark eyes, which Jenny couldn't see but somehow sensed, holding a new warmth. By the end of the second week, Moonbeam was following Jenny around the corral without a lead rope, responding to voice commands and gentle touches. The transformation was remarkable, but Jenny knew the real test was yet to come. And Sam Morrison returned on a Tuesday morning, his massive frame casting a long shadow. As he approached the corral, he'd been skeptical when he left Moonbeam with the blind girl, but desperation had overruled his doubts. Now, watching from a distance, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Moonbeam stood calmly as Jenny brushed her coat, the mare's head lowered in complete relaxation. When Jenny moved to her left side, Moonbeam shifted slightly to accommodate her, and when Jenny clicked her tongue twice, the mare backed up 3 precise steps. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," Jenny called without turning around. "I heard your horse's hoofbeats about a quarter-mile back. That big stallion of yours has a distinctive gait." Sam dismounted, shaking his head in wonder. "Miss Jenny, I've got to admit, I didn't think, well, I wasn't sure this would work out. But you gave us a chance anyway," Jenny replied, running her hand along Moonbeam's neck. "That says something about your character." What it says is that I was desperate, Sam admitted with a rueful chuckle. This mare cost me more than I care to admit, and I was starting to think she'd never be worth a damn. Jenny turned toward him, her expression serious. Morrison, Moonbeam isn't broken or worthless. She's been hurt, and she needed someone to show her that not all humans mean harm. But there's something you should know. She's going to need ongoing patience and understanding. The work we've done here is just the beginning. Sam nodded, though he realized she couldn't see the gesture. What do you mean? Watch, Jenny said simply. She clicked her tongue once, and Moonbeam immediately came to attention. A soft whistle brought the mare to her side, and a gentle touch on her shoulder caused her to lower her head for the halter. She's responding to you like you've been working together for years, Sam marveled. Trust isn't built overnight, Jenny explained as she led Moonbeam around the corral. But once it is established, it creates a bond stronger than any rope or bridle. The question is, will you continue to honor that trust? Sam watched as Jenny guided the mare through a series of movements, using only voice commands and gentle touches. Moonbeam responded eagerly, her previous skittishness replaced by confident cooperation. I've been thinking, Sam said slowly. My ranch is bigger than one man can properly manage. I got good hands, but none with your particular gift. Jenny paused, her hand resting on Moonbeam's neck. What are you suggesting, Mr. Morrison? I'm suggesting that maybe Moonbeam isn't the only one who could benefit from your touch. I've got a dozen horses that could use gentling, and I'd pay fair wages for the work. The offer hung in the air between them. Jenny had never left her homestead for more than a day or two, and the thought of traveling to Sam's ranch, navigating an unfamiliar place, was daunting. I appreciate the offer, she said carefully, but I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that. Think about it, Summers. You've got a gift, Miss Jenny. Seems a shame to keep it hidden away out here. Before Jenny could respond, the sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, moving fast and kicking up a considerable dust cloud. Trouble, Sam muttered, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. Jenny felt Moonbeam tense beneath her touch, the mare's breathing quickening as she sensed the change in atmosphere. Who are they? Jenny asked quietly. Don't know yet, Sam replied, but they're riding like they've got the devil on their heels. The riders pulled up short at the corral fence, their horses lathered and breathing hard. The lead rider, a thin man with a scraggly beard and cold eyes, looked from Sam to Jenny with obvious calculation. Well, the man drawled, Big Sam Morrison himself. And what have we here? His gaze settled on Jenny with an unpleasant smile. Pretty little thing, living all alone out here. Sam stepped forward, his imposing bulk serving as a clear warning. State your business, stranger, then move along. Business? The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. Maybe our business is with the lady. Heard tell she's got herself a valuable horse. Jenny's hand tightened on Moonbeam's halter, and she could feel the mare's growing agitation. Whatever these men wanted, it wasn't good. And look, the most striking part is still to come. But if this has made sense to you so far, like the video and send it to someone who needs to hear this. The tension in the air was thick, enough to cut with a knife. Jenny could hear the nervous shifting of the stranger's horses, the creak of leather as hands moved toward weapons, and beneath it all, Moonbeam's increasingly rapid breathing. The lady's under my protection, Sam said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, and that mare belongs to me. So, unless you've got legitimate business here, I suggest you ride on. The lead rider, who'd introduced himself as Colt Brennan, laughed again. Protection from a blind girl and an old giant? That's reach. He gestured to his companions. See, we heard about this special mare from a mutual acquaintance. Fella named Vance used to own her before you came along with your fancy money. Sam's jaw tightened. Vance Carver had been the mare's previous owner, the one who'd mistreated her so badly. Sam had bought Moonbeam at auction after Carver's debts caught up with him, but apparently the man wasn't ready to let go of his grievances. Carver lost any claim to this horse when he couldn't pay his debts, Sam stated firmly. Now move along before this gets unpleasant. Oh, it's already unpleasant, Brennan replied, his hand resting on his gun butt. You see, Carver figures he was cheated out of what was rightfully his. He's willing to pay good money to get his property back. Jenny stepped forward, surprising everyone. Mr. Brennan, she said, her voice steady despite the danger. I don't know what Carver told you, but this mare was legally purchased. More importantly, she's been healing from the abuse she suffered under his care. Abuse, Brennan scoffed. Carver said she was just spirited. Needed a firm hand. A firm hand. Jenny's voice carried a note of steel that made even Sam look at her with surprise. Is that what you call whip marks and rope burns? Is that what you call breaking a horse's spirit through fear and pain? Moonbeam whinnied softly, as if sensing the conversation was about her. Jenny's hand moved soothingly along her neck, but her attention remained focused on the men. Do you want to know what real horse training looks like? Jenny continued. Watch this. Without taking her eyes off the strangers, Jenny clicked her tongue twice. Moonbeam immediately backed up 3 steps. A soft whistle brought her forward again, and a gentle touch on her shoulder caused her to bow her head in a graceful curtsy. That, Jenny said firmly, is what trust and patience can accomplish. What Carver did was torture, pure and simple. Brennan's expression has shifted from amusement to something darker. Pretty words, blind girl. But Carver's offering $50 for the return of his horse, and we aim to collect over my dead body. Sam growled, stepping protectively in front of Jenny. That can be arranged, one of Brennan's companions said, his hand moving to his weapon. The situation was escalating rapidly, and Jenny knew that violence would solve nothing. Worse, it would undo all the progress she'd made with Moonbeam. The mare was already agitated by the hostile atmosphere, and gunfire would likely send her into a panic that could take weeks to overcome. Wait, Jenny said, raising her hand. There's another way to settle this. Sam looked at her, as if she'd lost her mind. Jenny, these men aren't here to negotiate. Maybe not, she replied, but they're here for money, not justice. Mr. Brennan, what if I could prove to you that returning Moonbeam to Carver would be the worst possible outcome for everyone involved? Brennan raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Give me 10 minutes, Jenny said. Let me show you what this mare has become under proper care. If, after seeing that, you still think she belongs with Carver, then we'll discuss terms. Jenny, no, Sam protested, but she held up her hand. Trust me, she said quietly, then louder. But I have one condition. No weapons drawn, no threats. Just watch and learn. Brennan considered this, then nodded to his men. 10 minutes, blind girl, but don't try anything clever. Jenny turned to Moonbeam, her hands moving to remove the halter entirely. The mare stood free in the corral, no rope or restraint holding her. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then Jenny began to hum. I want to know how far this message is reaching. Comment below and tell me which city or country you're watching from. The melody that rose from Jenny's lips was unlike anything the men had heard before. Part lullaby, part ancient song, carrying notes that seemed to speak directly to something primal and peaceful. Moonbeam's ears pricked forward immediately, and her entire posture shifted from nervous alertness to focused attention. Jenny began to move, not with the careful, measured steps of someone navigating by touch, but with the fluid grace of a dancer who knew every inch of her stage. Moonbeam followed, matching her pace perfectly, as if they were connected by invisible threads. Come, beautiful girl, Jenny murmured, her voice carrying clearly in the desert air. Show them who you really are. What happened next left even Sam Morrison speechless. Jenny raised her right hand, and Moonbeam reared it up on her hind legs, not in fear or aggression, but in a magnificent display of controlled power. A gentle gesture brought the mare back down, and she immediately moved into a smooth, collected trot around the corral. "Easy now," Jenny called, and Moonbeam shifted into a flowing canter, her silver coat gleaming in the sunlight. Another soft command brought her to a sliding stop directly in front of Jenny, close enough that the mare's breath stirred the young woman's hair. Brennan men that waxed in stunned silence as Jenny performed what could only be described as a dance with the horse. Every movement was fluid, every command given through subtle gestures and tonal changes that the mare responded to instantly. There were no ropes, no bits, no force of any kind, just pure communication between two beings who had learned to trust each other completely. "This is impossible," one of Brennan's men whispered. "No horse moves like that, without a bridle." Jenny heard the comment and smiled. "Moonbeam, show them your favorite trick." She stepped back and simply pointed to a spot on the ground. Moonbeam walked over and lay down, rolling onto her side in complete invulnerability. For a hor, a prey animal whose survival depended on the ability to flee, this was the ultimate display of trust. "You see," Jenny said, walking over to sit beside the reclining mare, "this is what Moonbeam has become when treated with respect and understanding. She's not just obedient, she's a partner. She chooses to work with me because she knows I'll never hurt her." She looked up toward where she knew Brennan stood, though her own seeing eyes couldn't find his face. "Now imagine taking her back to a man who broke her spirit with whips and chains. How long do you think it would take before she became that frightened, angry animal again? How long before all this trust and beauty was destroyed?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its earlier hostility. "Carver said she was worthless. Said she couldn't be ridden or trained." "Carver was wrong about many things," Jenny replied, scratching behind Moonbeam's ears as the mare continued to rest peacefully beside her. "He saw only what he wanted to take from her, not what she had to offer." Sam stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Brennan, I paid fair market price for this horse at a legal auction, but more than that, look at what she's become. Would you really want to destroy something this beautiful for $50? Jenny stood and clicked her tongue once. Moonbeam immediately rose to her feet, shaking the dust from her coat. The mare moved to Jenny's side and lowered her head, allowing the young woman to rest her forehead against the horse's face in a gesture of pure affection. "There's something else you should know," Jenny said quietly. "Moonbeam is going to have a fall." The announcement hit like a thunderbolt. Sam stared at her in amazement. "How did you—" I felt the changes in her body, heard the subtle differences in her breathing and movement, Jenny explained. "She's about 3 months along, I'd estimate. Taking her back to Carver now wouldn't just be cruel to her. It would endanger her unborn fall." Brennan removed his hat and ran his fingers through his hair. "Carver didn't mention anything about a fall. Because he doesn't know," Sam said, understanding dawning in his voice. "He probably never took the time to really observe her, to understand what she needed." Jenny nodded. "A pregnant mare needs gentle care, proper nutrition, and a stress-free environment. She needs to feel safe and protected. Can you honestly say that Carver would provide that?" The silence stretched on as Brennan wrestled with his conscience. Finally, he looked at his companions and shook his head. "Boys, I think we've been chasing the wrong horse." "But Carver's money," one of them protested. "Carver's money isn't worth destroying something like this," Brennan said firmly. He turned to Jenny and touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Miss, I apologize for the trouble. You've shown me something today that I won't soon forget." As the 3 men mounted their horses to leave, Brennan paused. "For what it's worth, that Carver fellow struck me as the type who'd mistreat more than just horses. You might want to talk yourself." With that warning, they rode away, leaving Jenny, Sam, and Moonbeam alone in the settling dust. The weeks that followed brought a sense of peace that Jenny hadn't experienced since her father's death. Word of her remarkable work with Moonbeam had spread throughout the territory, and Sam's offer of employment at his ranch no longer seemed quite so daunting. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jenny told Sam during one of his regular visits, "about working with your other horses." Sam, who had been watching Moonbeam graze contentedly in the pasture, turned his attention to her. "And I think I'd like to try it," she said, though uncertainty colored her voice. "But I'd need to bring Moonbeam with me. She's going to need special care as her pregnancy progresses." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Sam assured her. "That mare's earned her place as the foundation of my breeding program, and you've earned your place as the finest horse trainer I've ever seen." Jenny smiled at the compliment, but her expression grew serious. "There's something else. I've been thinking about what Mr. Brennan said about Carver. Men like him don't usually give up easily." Sam nodded grimly. "I've had the same thought. That's another reason I'd feel better having you at the ranch. More people around, better security." The decision, when it finally came, felt natural and right. Jenny had spent 2 years proving she could survive on her own, but survival and living were two different things. At Sam's ranch, she could use her gifts to help animals that needed healing, while being part of a community that valued her contributions. The morning of her departure, Jenny stood in the corral with Moonbeam one last time, her hands moving over the mare's increasingly rounded sides. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," she whispered. "And your foal is going to grow up in a place where kindness matters more than force." Moonbeam nickered softly, as if she understood. The bond between them had grown beyond mere training. They were partners now, each having healed something broken in the other. Sam arrived with a wagon to transport Jenny's few belongings and a gentle gelding for her to ride. "You ready for this adventure, Miss Jenny?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, accepting his help in mounting the horse. "Though I have to admit, I'm nervous about learning a whole new place." "Don't worry about that," Sam said with a chuckle. "By the time you've been there a week, you'll know every inch of the ranch better than men who've worked there for years." As they prepared to leave, old Pete Hawkins appeared, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. "Figured you might need some things to get started," he said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. "And don't think this means I approve of you gallivanting off across the territory." Jenny leaned down from her horse to squeeze his weathered hand. "Thank you, Pete, for everything." The journey to Sam's ranch took the better part of a day, but Jenny found herself enjoying the experience more than she'd expected. Sam proved to be an excellent guide, describing the changing landscape and pointing out terminals she could use for navigation. "There's the ranch," announced as they crested a hill in the late afternoon. "What do you think?" Jenny couldn't see the sprawling buildings or the vast corrals filled with horses, but she could hear the sounds of a thriving operation, the neighing of horses, the lowing of cattle, the voices of ranch hands going about their work. "It sounds like home," she said simply. As they rode into the yard, several of Sam's men gathered to meet them. Jenny could sense their curiosity and perhaps some skepticism about the blind woman their boss had hired. "Boys," Sam announced, "I'd like you to meet Jenny Thompson, our new horse trainer." And this, he gestured to Moonbeam, who was following closely behind Jenny's mount, "is the mare I've been telling you about." One of the hands, a young man named Billy, stepped forward. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but we heard some pretty tall tales about what you can do with horses." Jenny smiled as she dismounted. "Well, Billy, I suppose you'll just have to see for yourself. But I can promise you this, every horse deserves to be treated with respect and understanding. We can remember that. The rest will follow." As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that Jenny could only imagine, she stood in the corral with Moonbeam, listening to the sounds of her new home. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and the evening breeze, carried the scent of sage and possibility. "What do you think, girl?" she asked Moonbeam, running her hands along the mare's neck. "Ready for our next adventure?" Moonbeam whinnied softly, and in that sound, Jenny heard agreement, contentment, and something else, hope for the future they would build together. The giant rancher had asked her care for a mare, but in the end, Jenny had found something far more valuable than money or reputation. She had found her calling, her community, and her place in the vast, unforgiving, but ultimately beautiful landscape of the American West. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jenny knew that this was just the beginning of their story. There would be challenges ahead, more horses to heal, more skeptics to convince, and perhaps more men like Carver, who saw strength as something to be broken rather than nurtured. But she was ready for whatever came next. After all, she had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what we can see, but from what we choose to believe in, even in the darkness. And in the gentle breathing of the mare beside her, Jenny heard the promise of new life, new hope, and new beginnings stretching out like the endless western sky. The end.